Alright, what sort of tune are you gonna play?
Oh, am I playing a tune? I was just waiting. How's the sound?
Hang on, I'm throwing this in.
Dialed in volumes.
Yep, it's all good. Hey guys, we are here with Jeremiah Robison.
Yeah, Robison. You can call me Jeremy if you want, or
Jeremy.
Whatever.
If you're really tight with him, you call him Jer.
Yeah. So we're neighbors, or
exactly.
I guess ex-neighbors. When did you move away?
It's been a while. Like 2 or 3 years ago, we moved out. I really miss our old big house.
Yeah, it's a beautiful house. Yeah, we live right next door. Been here a little over 10 years. So I just real quick, I was born in Canada, raised Canadian, actually dual citizen because my parents are American. And when I was 15, they moved back here to Utah. So half of my high school experience was here in Provo, and I've been here ever since. Come from an awesome LDS family. My dad is very faithful in his callings, and he was a mission president, currently a sealer. And my mom, she's a spiritual giant as well. And I look up to them a lot. I really appreciate my heritage in the church, and it's almost like it's just in my blood. It's my culture. I love the people here. But to be honest, I'm not currently active in the LDS church, and it's not anything to do with being offended or leaving because of some doctrine or anti-Mormon things. Honestly, the only reason I'm not going to church right now is because I'm exploring and opening my mind to other possibilities of truth. And I need this time to really search. And I know that's not for everyone. And, the church works amazing for so many people, like even my dad, I can see it in my mom. But right now, I'm trying to establish a case, I guess, on this podcast not for leaving the church, for openness, opening your mind, opening your heart. And that's really all I'm doing right now. I felt like I was in this box for so long, or somewhat of a bubble, where I was almost living with anxiety and fear over other possibilities. Like I was like, I can't entertain that book or that idea because it's outside of my box. I'm going to stick here and just trust. And that's noble too. Like I do have a respect for people that can discipline themselves in their life to live in faith to a way that they're diving into fully. Go for it. Mm-hmm. But I have felt personally that opening my mind and allowing more exploration has had profound effects on my life. It's made me more relaxed in my body. I almost feel like I used to have this anxiety here. I don't know why I always touch my right shoulder, but like this linear concept. We live in the church with such a linear view of, I need to do this for something in the future, for a treasure over there, neglect this or do this. And it's this constant chase and seeking of something outside of myself, where what I've been exploring lately is the philosophies of the East. And it's really caused me to flip the script on that a bit and go more inward and reflect inward. And I'm starting to see, even as Jesus taught, that the kingdom of heaven is inside. That's what I'm waking up to. It feels good in my body. Really, what I'm trying to establish here is not a case for any of these other philosophies or to argue their position.
Sure.
It's just a case for openness.
Right.
One thing I firmly believe in, and what's been helping me a lot lately, is just to keep my mind and my heart open. Because for so long, I kept it in that bubble, like you're saying, or in the box. And it's almost, that was my motto of living life. Like, I was comfortable there. I almost thought that was the way. Like, no, we don't question anything. We just stick to what we were taught. And, you know, I felt like it was working for me. I felt pretty good about that. But yeah, it wasn't until just a few years ago, actually, I started practicing meditation. And it's funny because I tell people meditation is somewhat of a gateway drug for me. Like, I've experimented with psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, but really all this started was from, I downloaded the Headspace app and I listened to the guy's book, Andy, that wrote that book. And what I started to encounter was just so much more space in my inner world that I wasn't looking at before. I'd always be chasing some external goal or just like, you know, a God that is outside of me, needing approval from said God. And it almost started to switch a little bit to where I encountered a lot more of whatever I was praying to or seeking inside, like actually in my own inner world, when I would quiet the mind and just kind of sit there in meditation. So that's kind of where this path for me began. And since then, yeah, there's been a lot of experiences. Like they say, psychedelics are somewhat of a fast track towards this path, but meditation is the tried and true course. Like you don't need to have a psychedelic experience to understand these other altered states or realms, if you, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so it's been about, I would say 4 or 5 years since I've started exploring more in the East and reading lots of, well, not so much reading, I actually listened to Alan Watts on YouTube. A lot of his lectures are there. So I remember listening to one when I was gardening out in our front yard when this all kind of started. And I believe the topic of the lecture was something along the lines of "You're It," where he was playing along with words of the concept of hide and seek. So a children's game that people love, obviously. And he was trying to tie that into his lecture, that in essence, we are all God playing hide and seek with ourselves. So
okay,
we like to run away and get lost, and then we'll come back and be found, and we go get lost. And it's almost like this game we're playing. Another phrase he uses is we're all just God in drag. And this concept that I'm bringing in here from the East is the kingdom of heaven within as opposed to without. So the way I always used to see it was, this is something in the future. It's at hand. We're going to wait for it. We got to be good, and someday we'll have the blessing, right? But this new concept of, you know, let's suppose, you know, for the sake of argument here, that we all believe that God is inside us. What does that mean? To me, it's this shared ground of being that we all have, where deep down inside, I'm not talking even our soul, our individual spirits, further beyond that, there's this Hindu saint named Ramana Maharshi that has this self-inquiry practice where he says, follow the I thought. So when you're thinking I, who's saying I? Like, follow that deeper. Go back even further. Who's the one even being aware of you thinking about I? So yeah, that's the space I'm talking about here, where it's almost, you can't describe it. It's the unspeakable. It's the great mystery. It's the, Alan Watts likes to say, it's like looking at your own eyes. We can never do that. We can't bite our own teeth, lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps. It's the great mystery is what I would call it. And there's even Christian mystics that have written books about this concept of the cloud of unknowing. It's called contemplative prayer, where the key for that is to actually get out of your thinking mind, where you're labeling, judging, slicing, separating, and you actually relax into this cloud that they call the cloud of unknowing. So yeah, that's what has been resonating with me lately. Ever since that day gardening out front, listening to the lecture with Alan Watts, it planted this seed of like, could it really be that maybe the God I've been seeking has been here all along, right, inside of me, and it's shared with you? And when I look in your eyes, I can see it, and you look in my eyes, you can see it too. It's this vast mystery. But so I don't know. I went off on a tangent. What were we talking about?
That's fine. That's fine. Because like, so what we were talking about was like how tying this back into church culture and with Jesus Christ. We talked about how that was the main message that Jesus Christ was trying to preach, was that not that the kingdom of God is something that's about to come not that it's going to come in the millennium, but that it's already here. It's within you. He talked to his apostles about, oh, before I come again, there will be lots of terrible things. But he never said, oh, and then the kingdom of God will come. Yeah. He already said the kingdom of God was already here. And so he came before us saying, I and the Father are one, because he found God in himself.
Yeah. You know, that's really interesting because it makes me think on the scripture where he spoke about the kingdom of heaven being as the children, right? Like, it's like, suffer the children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. Look at them. And when you think about a child, what's the difference here? That they haven't learned to put on their spacesuits yet of the thinking mind and separation and judgment and all these gold stars we give ourselves to make us so separate, right? The children are immersed in the true kingdom of heaven, which is almost like what we were talking about earlier, that cloud of unknowing, that inner world, and they're so free. So, you know, there's even that scripture in the Book of Mormon, the famous one, I think it's Mosiah 3:19, says the natural man's an enemy to God, has been since the fall of Adam, will be forever, unless he yields to the enticings of the Holy Spirit, putteth off the natural man, becomes as a child. What is the natural man? So I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I like to play a game with that scripture and actually substitute the word natural man with ego.
Okay.
It's interesting when you do it. So think about it again. I'll say it again. The ego is the enemy of God. That's what keeps us separate from God, right? And it has been since the fall of Adam.
Separate from ourselves.
Yeah, separate from ourselves, separate from everyone. It's the ego, and it's a tool. It shouldn't be considered as something as absolutely evil. But if you look at it in the lens of that scripture, the ego is the enemy of God, has been since the fall. The fall is when Adam and Eve were literally separated from God. They went from being the one into the two, into the duality.
That's when they split off to male and female.
Yeah, and that part of that is with the ego. So
that's what Genesis is all about, is dividing. Okay. It's dividing light from dark, male from female.
Establishing the polarities, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so
it's like what that ancient, have you heard of the concept of Adam Kadmon?
No, I haven't.
It's like this ancient Hebrew concept where, like, originally everything was, Adam Kadmon is sort of like this androgynous being who is sort of like male and female, but then God cut him in half to create Adam and Eve, male and female.
Almost kind like the rib idea.
Yeah, because it's sort of like, before Eve, there was no difference between male and female. It was just Adam. So that was Adam Kadmon. He was a bit of both.
I'll have to read up on that, because the fall of Adam is so profound. You know, when you really dig deep into the polarities and the dualities and the concept of spiritual death, what does that mean? You know, separation. It's like Alan Watts says, we're playing hide and seek with God. We had to get kicked out of the garden. This is all part of whatever this is, you know. And that's the funny thing, is like, we can think about the purpose of life and all this, and when you dig deep enough, there really isn't a purpose. It's more of a play, like the way the Hindus see
like
reality.
The way that Shakespeare would put it.
Yeah, the Hindus call it a lila, which means the divine play, the cosmic play. And when you think about a play or even music, we're not playing a song to get to some destination in the chords, or if we're dancing on a dance floor, we're not trying to get to a spot on the dance floor. We're doing it because we're in the play. So yeah, like, just to give you one example, I've had a recent ayahuasca ceremony. Ayahuasca is a plant medicine. It's very sacred, been used for thousands of years, and it contains DMT. DMT is known also as the spirit molecule or the God molecule, and it puts you in a near-death experience. So when we're born, we actually release DMT naturally, and when we're dying too. But, you know, with this plant medicine, it can mimic that state. And when I was in it, it put me psychologically in this really difficult position, because I started to have nowhere to stand, I guess is how I would describe it. Where right now I'm Jeremy in my reality, in my form, in the play, playing my part. There, I got so zoomed out into the macro where it got a little scary, a little cold. I was like, wow, like, I'm everything there is. I'm part of everything. And how do I get back? Like, I was like freaking out. It was so nuts. But anyways, my point, when I started to learn how to breathe in my body, get back into my human heart, quiet the mind, I got back into the play where, you know, it can be really cold in the macro. When you're zoomed out and you see all this unfold and see how pointless things are sometimes, you're just like, what's the point? It's cold. Like maybe you'll see someone like trip on their cane and all of a sudden you'll say, oh, that's karma. How cold is that, right? But we need to get into our human hearts, back into our bodies, and experience our part in the play, which is so beautiful. Like each of us are essential to the whole, you know, all of us. And if you're to look, imagine reality is just a sphere right here, right?
Okay.
You put a little point on a sphere, that's you. There's me over here. But everywhere you touch, it's the center of the sphere. Like we are deep down, if you go right into the root, we're all God. That's what I believe. And I'm not here to convince anyone of that or say that's the way it is. It's what I've been choosing to believe.
But it's one of those interesting concepts that everybody should meditate on and ponder.
And it flips the script. It really does. Mm-hmm. When you quit chasing a linear model of anxiety and you come back into the realization that, wow, it's all in here. You can take pauses in a day and visit God. Literally. Like you'll quiet the mind, open the heart. Maybe you'll have, like some people like to use this thing called hape that grounds you. And that can put you into that state again. So, I don't know, like when I was living in the linear model, I did have this feeling of anxiety, like almost over my shoulder of like, I can't be here, right? Like it was uncomfortable to be here, which, you know, you can say it's okay because you have this carrot you're chasing and at the end of the day, you're going to get it. Maybe you will. But I think there's so much more to the concept of presence and being in your part in the play as a human being. And we're missing out so much if we are chasing all the time, right? Of something that's just already here in essence. But yeah, so
I definitely feel like a big problem with not just like in the church, but also like in today's society in general is we're all about identities and talking about I identify as this, I identify as that, when it should be just kind of the core central essence of being like this is me. I'm not identifying as anything. This is simply me playing my part.
You know, that reminds me of a story. Ram Dass is one of my favorite teachers. I actually consider him like my guru, really. But he shared a story of his first experience with psilocybin mushrooms. It was a psychedelic mushroom. And when he was starting to come up on the mushrooms and actually get into that psychedelic state, he started to see his own self in different roles. Like right in front of him, almost like a movie. He would see there's Richard, the good boy, and there's the Harvard student and professor, and then each of these roles would switch and then they would disappear, and he got a little nervous. He's like, okay, well, I guess I could do without those roles. You know, things change. I understand impermanence. But when he said that, he's like, okay, well, at least I have my body. And he goes to look down at his potty on the couch. Nobody. He was gone.
Wow.
Started freaking out. He's about to scream. He's like, Tim, help. Like his friend Timothy Leary, it was his house. And at that moment, when he was really freaking out about it, he started to then experience what we were talking about, that eye, following the eye deeper and deeper. Because what happened to him to follow that, this is what triggered it, is when he got to that state of fear where he wasn't here anymore, he had a thought come in his mind of, okay, well, who's minding the store? Who's the one being aware of that? Like, there's somebody there. Like, I don't see my legs, but who's noticing this, right? So he followed that, and it got him into this space that he describes as being home. He's like, I don't know what it was, but it felt like home. Like, here I am. You know, so that was just a cool story example of all the roles, and he even has a lecture on, he calls them spacesuits. Like, so we learn how to put on our spacesuits, right? Like, when we're a baby, we're just fresh and new. Everything's all like, wonder, right? Like, there are no labels. Like, what is that? That's what that is. But you start to learn how to wear your spacesuit, and maybe you get really good at it, and you get gold stars, and people admire your spacesuit. But eventually it might get difficult, and then you need to go to a therapist, and the therapist has his spacesuit, and you're like, oh, what a nice spacesuit you have, and how do I get one of those? And you change yours. So the point is, like, all these roles they're not really real, and they always change. We change all the time. What we need to connect to is what's behind the roles. And, if you're interested in a documentary about Ram Dass, my favorite one of all time is called Becoming Nobody. That's the whole title. And it really is shedding all these layers to your true essence and letting that shine forth. And like I said, impermanence is probably the truest truth. The one thing that I can say with pure conviction is we're all going to die. And everything's changing. Everything's changing.
That and taxes. Those are the number one truths of the universe.
Yep. And it sounds depressing, but it's not. Imagine if everything stayed the same. What would that be like? Hell.
It would be, yeah.
So, I love the changes, the seasons.
Death is what allows change to happen, sort of a thing.
Yeah, it's like, and the other side of that coin is birth.
Mm-hmm.
Which we can go deep into that. There's a lot of philosophies from Alan Watts about this concept. I think a very big fear for people that explore like I do and leave the box is death. That's the first thing that comes up. Oh no, like what's going to happen when I die? I don't have my linear carrot anymore. Where am I going? What is this? And it freaked me out for a bit because I would almost get into these like rabbit holes of annihilation or like nothingness, like what if we die and never wake up? Like what's that?
Some nihilistic thoughts.
Yeah, some nihilistic thoughts. And first, before I share an experience about that though, what are your thoughts on death?
I don't know. Death is such a complicated subject that I'm not entirely sure what to think about death. In some cases, it's scary, but at the same time, there's something very peaceful about just simply, this is a part of nature, this is a part of changing and developing into as you could say, a higher state of consciousness, so you just allow yourself to slip into it. And that's something about that is like, it's like you take what's commonly thought of as the scariest thing, and then somehow just that one thought makes it the most peaceful thing of all time.
Yeah, it's like almost flipping the concept of pain and pleasure. Like
right.
It's just one little flip, right? Yeah, but what about after death? Have you thought much on that? Like,
I mean, beyond like what we talk about in Sunday school about like, there's going to be an afterlife and you're going to get judged and you're going to go into these 3 kingdoms of glory. I used to really be into that kind of stuff, but like for me, I'm less about that kind of stuff that's going to happen after death, and I'm thinking more about how do I implement those kinds of stuff in my life today, instead of waiting for the afterlife.
Well, what you're saying here is you're starting to let go of the linear model.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's the way to live life. That's how we enjoy, right? But yeah, like the concept of death to me, the moment of death isn't what scares me so much. I know it could be painful. It could be, I don't know, maybe blissful. We really
right. You never know. You could die in your sleep, or you could die burning
slowly, or anything. So, but that stuff, like that's all just like horror movies and stuff for me. Like what scares me even deeper, is the concept of annihilation. Of what if we die and that's it. So that was a fear I carried with me for months, and it wasn't until I've had ayahuasca probably 5 times now. I went into an ayahuasca ceremony with that as my intention of help me resolve this fear of death. And what I saw in that experience was really profound. So, and these weren't like visuals, like seeing on a movie right in front of my eye. It was more like my mind's eye, but I would see this circle that it almost like the medicine was teaching me this concept. So inside the circle, you were to write everything. So everything is inside this circle. Outside the circle, we can put nothing. That's what I'm afraid of, right?
Okay.
So I was believing, or not believing, but just like fearing that when I die, I might go into the nothing. And what I was taught in that moment, like overwhelmingly, I could feel it in my bones, was absolutely not. You are part of the everything. You exist as a part of this whole, an essential part. So do you, everything, even that tree. And when we die, let's say we don't resurrect or reincarnate or whatever you want to believe, right? What's the problem? Because you're part of the everything. It's almost if a wave were to crash right now into the tide and just merge right back into the ocean. It's almost like that our individual souls would receive somewhat of an upgrade, I guess, like merging back into the one. Wow, that was a fun play. That was a fun trip. Wow. now you're God, you know? So, and I'm not saying I believe that. That just resolved the fear. It gave me that kind of glimpse of, okay, you want to go down that rabbit hole? Let me show you how that really works if you were to follow it all the way through. And to me, it totally took away my fear of death, because that concept of a wave going back into the ocean of love was so peaceful to me. Like I felt it in my body. And but yeah, I'm not saying I necessarily believe that. I just needed to understand that rabbit hole more. I'm kind of leaning more on the side of reincarnation, but I haven't ruled out resurrection. Honestly, I haven't ruled out anything. Just like I said in the beginning, this is a case for openness. I'm not trying to convince anybody or even myself in a certain way.
I like the way that Alan Watts put it. Is he's like, I'm not trying to convert you. I just want you to play with it. You know,
yeah, just
like you're a child playing with a toy.
Yeah, I love that actually, because life doesn't have to be so serious. He's a big advocate of the human. So is Ram Dass. So a lot of people that embark on spiritual journeys or paths like this, or even in the church, they push away the human so far, like to the point where now we're like extremely on the polarity of the holy or living the righteous life. I have to be this certain way, which isn't healthy. Like you need to also have your human. Like Jesus even spoke about being in the world, but not of the world. Mm-hmm. We're both form and formless. You know, our spirit, we can sense this. Like this is actually another conviction I have. I know we're of the spirit. I know it's beyond the body. There's in me, I don't know how to explain that, but it's like an inner knowing. But we're also the body, right? We have this temple, this vessel that we need to use and not neglect, even celebrate it, you know? So yeah, it's a slippery slope, like going down the path of holiness or whatever method you choose. In the end, all methods are traps. We got to give up the method. Even, I don't know if it's a Zen saying, but in spiritual writings, I wish I could quote this directly. There's one that says, the final gate to the inner temple is letting go of righteousness, letting go of being right. So, you know, like that concept of I have to be the one who knows, or I have to be right, and that's wrong.
That's a big thing about today's society. Everybody's got to be right.
Mm-hmm. And that's the last gate. You let go of that, you're in the inner temple. You're in the kingdom of heaven. That's where children live. Are children obsessing over am I right?
No, they just want to have fun, you know?
Yeah. Kids just want to have fun. Yeah. No, it's a beautiful concept, and yeah, at the end of the day, we gotta appreciate our bodies. These are our temples. This is where we are housing our spirits in this play. So yeah, I like the idea of integrating that for sure into our daily life and doing things to celebrate the body and not push away so much.
You know, like lifting.
Yeah, exercising, whatever.
Which is, I think, something that really needs to come back into the church. Like it's briefly talked about in the Word of Wisdom, but it's like it's not in the For the Strength of Youth currently. It's like absent. So like we definitely need to remember our bodies. I think we all need to be exercising our bodies both physically and spiritually.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like we need to talk about more of that in the church as opposed to what to avoid. What do we do with the body, you know? But
in some cases, I'd say that's the more important aspect, is what to do than what not to do.
For sure. Yeah, because what we resist persists. Like if we get so caught up in resisting, it's not healthy. And yeah, that's the other thing with this path too. I've, obviously, like if I'm not an active member of the church, I'm not obsessing over all the rules and everything Word of Wisdom wise, or, just like how you live your life in the church. And with that, what it's done for me, it's hard to explain. I guess the way I would say it is I'm coming out as gray. I know that sounds like I'm coming out as gay. I'm not gay.
That's why you're wearing gray.
I'm coming out as gray. It's the middle ground. And it triggers people in the church saying that, because remember, I don't know if a general authority, or there's probably lots of talks that would say, you can't be a fence sitter. pick a side, all in on one, all in on the other. Lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Like, I know the concept, I get it. I see it as Carl Jung. What do you think about Carl Jung? Tell me about
when I think about right. Well, I think when I think about Carl Jung is he's all about not being perfect but being whole, like incorporating the shadow within yourself, the negative parts of yourself that you try to shove down and try to ignore. But the more you shove them down, the darker they get, and like you start projecting it onto other people. Yeah. And usually the people that you hate, those are aspects of they're reflecting aspects of things that you hate about yourself that you're trying to push down. So by integrating your shadow, you start to recognize you're no different from the person that that you claim to not like, the person that you think you're better than or anything like that. That you're actually one in the same whole.
Yeah, so just to continue on my point though, that concept of spew you out of my mouth, lukewarm, fence sitter. To me, that's more lazy. I don't consider myself lazy. Like, I'm so passionate about this path that I'm on of seeking God, of seeking the inner temple, and just trying to go there as much as I can. So it's not that. What I mean by when I say Carl Jung and coming out as gray is it's ending, just like you said, it's ending that civil war within ourselves. We're constantly pushing away the shadow, fighting the dark, clinging to the light, almost like, like in the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, I kind of read that as much as I used to the Book of Mormon back in the day, because it's so powerful. What it teaches is the concept of letting go of attachment to outcomes. So we're constantly either pushing or pulling, and that's not the way to live. The way to live is in harmony, in peace, in allowance. It's a vibration of allowance. And when I say coming out as gray, what I mean is I'm trying to allow more, to be accepting more, to take judgment away, not of just other people or situations, but of my own self. And it's not easy. I'm not perfect at that. Like, there's a long way to go, but it's my path. It's the gray path.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. It's a yin and the yang. It's like you have the two, and it's coming.
Exactly. Everything that Carl Jung talks about, it all goes back to yin yang. It all goes back to those ancient Taoist concepts.
Yeah.
That we in today's Western world have largely forgotten about.
Yeah, it's like that Zen saying of the great way. Is it visible or is it accessible to he who has no preferences? Something along those lines.
It's sort of like everybody knows what the yin yang is, but not everybody sits down to contemplate how deep it actually is.
Yeah, how deep do you want to dig into your own darkness?
Exactly.
If you dig deep enough, you'll find that you're just like everyone else deep down. Maybe your pattern or your personality and your essence isn't putting you in those same circumstances, but we all have it. And the thing is, like with Carl Jung, one thing I like to share about him is actually Alan Watts had a meeting with him once, and there's this really cool YouTube video where I think you just search Alan Watts, Carl Jung, and he's reading Carl Jung's writings on this ending the inner civil war. And he goes on later to say, he's like, I've never sat with a being like Carl Jung to the point where the way he described it is like at the moment he sat down with him, it was as if he could fully relax, like all the tension, like he was allowed to be him, like, and not many people allow you to be you, right? Like fully, and Carl Jung didn't. So it almost reminds me of, like, I like to imagine how Jesus was, like, to actually be in his presence and see, for example, the woman who committed adultery and they're gathered around wanting to stone her. He's looking around, he's like, okay, whoever is without sin, cast the first one, looks at her, and I like to imagine what his eyes look like this vibration of acceptance. He's like, just go sin no more. He did not judge that woman at all. And I think we judge too much in the church. I feel like Jesus was very misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what he was teaching resonates like almost exactly with some of these Eastern spiritual teachings and philosophies that he tried to communicate to the Jews in their language.
Right.
But it wasn't understood. They killed him.
Because they're such foreign concepts.
Yeah, they literally put him to death. So I mean, he was way ahead of his time. Mm-hmm. And for just one example, so we talked about the kingdom of heaven within, that's one.
Right.
Children are the kingdom. You have to be born again. That's another one that goes really deep. It goes along with the ego too. Losing yourself to find yourself. What is that?
Right, because like Nicodemus was super confused about the whole born again thing. He's like, what? I gotta go back into my mom and get born again?
That's like, I can't do that. You're gross.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's funny. I forgot about that story.
Yeah.
But no, he was teaching you gotta be born again. What does that mean? What does it mean to lose yourself and find yourself? You know? Because even then, like people that are trying to do this in the linear model, they haven't done it yet.
Right.
You know? The real losing yourself is if you imagine the Hindu goddess Kali, who's holding the severed head, wearing a necklace of like 20 heads there and a blade. She represents the destroyer of the ego. So she's literally a goddess, also represents the void. But she portrays cutting off these heads, which represents the ego. And there's other artwork depicted of her that shows her in a much different vibration, like this beautiful nurturing mother, and it's always her holding a little child. So it's teaching us to get out of the thinking mind and surrender into our inner child.
Right, and that just tells us that death and rebirth are the same thing.
Yeah. And we all go through this. The ego is normal. It's like our tool, it's our friend. But it really is important that we learn to position ourselves down here. We're caught so much in the seat of the mind of like control. I have to linear, get this, save this to get that, do this to have treasures there. Instead of like literally just quieting that thinking mind and just being a child. That's what Jesus was trying to teach us. So there's that concept. There's another one that I like where he says, I am the way. And the way I like to think of that, because I feel like that's misunderstood too. And like I said, I'm not here to preach or convince anyone. This is my exploration, what I'm resonating with. And it's a very fun game to do.
Yeah, definitely.
But Eastern lens of this concept, right, of non-duality and shared Atman, ground of being, whatever's behind us all. So when Jesus said, I'm the way, I feel like most people interpret that as like, oh, that guy there, Jesus, his physical form, that being, that Jesus entity is the way, specifically. Like, I have to go through that form. I believe what he was saying, if we were to even like just change the words a little bit, instead of saying I am the way, maybe let's see it as I am is the way. And a lot of people, even in the church, love to dive into that concept of the I am. So when he would say, before Abraham was, I am, why did that freak out the Pharisees?
Because he's telling them that he's God.
Yeah, it's blasphemy to them. Yeah. And that's the concept, that's the way. He was teaching the Jews that behind it all, there's this atonement, right? This at-one-ment that puts us all in the non-dual space of love, loving awareness. And what he was saying, I don't believe that his physical form or his body is the way. I believe it's the state he was in, that Christ consciousness, that I am. I am the Father.
When you encompass all things.
Yeah, he's like,
and that's what the atonement was all about, and that's the biggest misunderstanding of the atonement.
Yeah, because we worship too literally. I feel that the biggest danger in any religion is taking it too literally.
Okay.
Remember, these are mythologies. A lot of the stories are. Even the Hindu, like there's maybe 30,000 gods in the Hindu religion or whatever you want to call it. Then I don't take them literally. Like each one has a symbol, an archetype. There's a mythology teaching inherent in that. And I know Jesus was a historical person, like actually lived, and there's limited writings on him. But I am starting to vibe a little bit more with this idea that the state he was in was the way. And it's not so much saying, hey guys, look at me. I am literally the way. You need to bow down to me, specifically Jesus. It's that oneness that he brought to us. He woke up, just like the Buddha. So
I believe you called him a Bodhisattva.
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 Yeah.
Okay. That's what the term is.
The term Bodhisattva is an enlightened being that didn't need to take another birth. So if you're thinking in the idea of reincarnation, we go through this wheel of karma where we're just constantly being reborn and shedding old karma. supposedly Jesus, as a bodhisattva, he was ready for nirvana, didn't need to come back. Like that, he transcended his being, his pattern and essence, but he decided to help us all to wake up and to come up to that vibration, that heart chakra. But yeah, it's beautiful to look at him in the lens of the East, because it opens up all these windows of perception, these doors of perception, and you can connect dots that I wasn't able to before when I was boxed in. So it's fascinating. I enjoy it. It's entertaining even. And we can do the same even with the LDS Church. There's a lot of teachings in the church that could benefit from having a little Eastern lens on it, non-linear lens.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Does anything come to mind right now?
So with the concept of the Book of Mormon, we were just talking about this the other day. You know, Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon using, was it the Urim and Thummim?
Yeah,
seer stones.
It was mainly the seer stone that he had, that his personal seer stone. But yeah, he also had the Urim and Thummim.
Yeah, so honestly, I have no issue with that, because I feel like he really did channel the Book of Mormon, like what is written there. Right. If you were to, even people in the church don't believe that he literally was understanding the words and translating, right? Wasn't this more of something he was seeing in the hat with the stones? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people that are able to do that. Like even, I don't know if you've heard of the Course in Miracles. This is from the 80s. This woman claimed to have channeled that whole Course in Miracles. There's the Law of One, Ra, an Egyptian, I don't know if it's a social memory complex or something in the cosmos that they claim to have channeled. So I don't know, this is kind of a weird tangent, but it's not really something to shed a light on from the Eastern point of view. But I did like that thought that maybe, Joseph Smith in that moment was literally just channeling it straight from the cosmos, and being almost like a psychic would, Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting that the stone he had on him when he died, I believe it's the seer stone, right? It's in the shape of a peyote button, which if you know what peyote is, it's a psychedelic cactus. And there's no proof of this, but I almost wonder if maybe he did have some psychedelic experiences, especially because he vibed so much with the Lamanites. Mm-hmm. and the indigenous people of the time, and I know those people use peyote, and they have anciently. It's part of their ceremonies and helps them to connect with the mystical. So who knows what he went through with this, and all these experiences, right. Like even the Pentecost and the Kirtland Temple.
There's no direct records that there was any involved, but
same with Moses. A lot of people think that burning bush was a psychedelic experience.
Right, or it was just literally a bush that got struck by lightning.
Yeah, I mean, but there's an interesting book called The Immortality Key that you should read. Comes out with a lot of documentation on art history and evidence of the use of psychedelics anciently, even in the Christian times, and psychedelic wines and things like that. But yeah, it's super interesting to see the lens of not just the East, but even the possibility of the use of plant medicines and psychedelics in the history of our scripture even, and the church and all of that. But yeah, like I said, I don't have any proof. It's just something to wonder about that I like to think about sometimes, especially now that I've experienced psychedelic trips, and I know where it takes you, and it's beyond what we're experiencing right now. This is a whole nother realm where there's a lot of ancient wisdom that surfaces, and just more activity in your brain and psyche. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about on the church side? What perspectives do you have in the church from the Eastern way of?
Well, I think we covered a lot of the main ones. I think we need a lot more Carl Jung integration. We need a lot more understanding of Alan Watts and just everything we've been talking about with these Eastern philosophies, because they've been, Western and Eastern philosophies have been so separate for so long.
Yeah.
It almost seems like the Western philosophy is all about cultivating the ego, whereas the Eastern philosophy is all about just dispelling the ego completely. And so I feel like we need to, usually when in nature, if two things don't get along, they end up just destroying each other. And the way that you actually progress to the next level is when two opposing things actually come together and harmonize, like a yin yang.
Uh-huh.
And so I think we need to harmonize the Western, what we know in the West, with these Eastern concepts that we've been talking about, and that's how we evolve to the next stage.
Yeah, I love that. I've been so deep into the Eastern side that I want to integrate a little bit more of my Western roots, and come back with it, which is kind of what I'm doing. But yeah, I remember our conversation just the other day. We were talking about the 3 degrees of glory, right?
Right.
And almost imagining what it'd be like in the literal view of the church saying, the exaltation, highest degree, go there. Then what? What's going to happen there? Like, we almost like got on this little topic where it kind of freaked myself out a bit, thinking like, if we're just going to be singing like endless concourses of angels forever, like, where does that end? Or what is that?
And it even more so if you're just a Christian who just believes in one heaven, just a regular Protestant Christian who just believes in there's one heaven.
Yeah.
And that's literally all you do. Is you just go and you're singing hymns forever, and be happy.
No darkness, just absolute light.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't know, like that maybe if that is true, our lens of perception changes and we're just stuck there and we love it. Right. I don't know what it's going to be, but I like to think that there is this component of the yin and the yang that makes things so beautiful. Like the whole, like look at the shadow and art, and like that you have all these lines, and what if it was just like no background, just foreground? Like you need it all, and I think that's what makes the play so beautiful. And who knows what happens in the very end, or if there is no end really, right? But the Buddhists talk about this concept of nirvana, escaping the birth-death cycle of samsara, this ocean of samsara, to where you can eventually merge back into the one and have no more births, which could be kind of like the Mormon concept of exaltation, really. Like both of those are a little trippy to me to think about, but we're here living a life, and that's the topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think, well, my main perspective of death at this point in my life is I don't think anyone truly knows what happens after we die. It could be a weird combination of everything we've been talking about, or it could be nothing. It could just ultimately whatever does happen after death, the best way to handle it is just to accept it and go with the flow. Just surrender to it.
Surrender is the name of the game. It all comes down to that, like getting out of our own way. We're caught up interfering with the way of nature when we try to control our experience so much instead of just allowing. And I feel like when we come to our deathbed, that'll be a really interesting time to practice surrender. Mm-hmm. And my grandpa died not too long ago. He's very old, like 96 or... Anyways, like when he was about to die, he wasn't even there. Like he was calling out for his dad and his brother and his mom. Like he was already crossing through. So it makes me think that there's this transition, especially if you're dying at a really old age where you're almost ready. Yeah. But yeah, who knows what will happen. I definitely have strong hunches that there's an afterlife. Like just even seeing my grandpa interact.
Right.
And just
all those stories about near-death experiences.
Exactly. And like my ayahuasca experience of like even going down a rabbit hole of not taking birth again was still beautiful. Like it was part of the everything. Mm-hmm. Like I know there's no nothing. It's like the song Kolob. If you could touch the outside curtains where nothing has a place, we're not going to live there ever. We're part of everything. So as a reminder that this is, me being on this podcast, I'm here. The only thing I'm trying to establish is a case for openness, to open your mind, open your heart. Right. I'm not saying to believe any way, just open your mind, open your heart. Like quit the lifestyle of, I need to stay in this box because I'm afraid of what's outside of it. That's not a way to live life. Mm-hmm. So,
like people that only read books from Desert Book or only listen to General Conference.
Yeah,
like you need to like those stuff is good, but like you need to be more open to other things.
Yeah, like I'm not out here going crazy partying like Vegas. I'm not like even anti-Mormon trying to fight things or even go there with certain doctrines.
In general, you shouldn't be anti anything.
Yeah, no, like like literally all this is, I am enjoying this. This is so fun and scary and awesome, all the things. Opening your mind is how you live. Open your heart. You know, it's a way of life, and that's what I'm trying to portray on this podcast, is just openness.
Sure.
You know, I'm not trying to convince, so I wanted to make that very clear. And yeah, like, you might think my views are weird. I'm going through this. I've only been exploring for like 3 or 4 years, and you know, who knows where it's going to lead, but I feel confident in my heart that it will lead to good, because my intention is good. I'm seeking God. Like, I literally am. Like, there's no question. I'm not fighting the church. I'm not trying to persuade anything about doctrines. I'm just seeking God. So that's it.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks
to talk about your wild imagination and everything that goes through your head. I hope you liked that video. Comment below what you think about all this stuff that we've been talking about being more open-minded and willing to accept things that are outside of your own control and just surrender to the way.
Yes. The great way is visible to those without preferences. Okay.
Well said. Well said. Like, comment, subscribe, and remember to keep it righteous.
Or let go of righteous and get into the inner temple.
Right, something like that.